The Glowmelon Mystery by Legendary Emerald.
Good morning, cruel, cruel world.
Twilight's sleep-encrusted eyes were half open, lavender pupils staring at the ceiling above her bed. Her unfocused gaze passed through the wooden planks, ignoring them. She was looking towards an indiscernible point in the distance where the remnants of her peaceful night's sleep now lay, forever outside of her grasp. She could hear rustling nearby, and a disgruntled voice murmuring to itself. It was barely noticeable against the cacophony coming out from outside the house, though. That infernal noise had taken her out of a wonderful dream, and deposited her into a cruel reality of constant dissonance and disturbing lack of caffeine. If the sound of tossing and turning she heard from her own room were any indication, she hadn't been the only victim of a rude awakening. Twilight reached a purple hoof around her bedstand. After a few tired swipes, she held an alarm clock in front of her face. She rubbed her bleary eyes and read the digital numbers. 8 a.m.
Well, that's not much earlier than I planned to wake up, I guess.
Twilight let out an audible sigh.
I guess it's time to start the day.
She sat up in bed, wobbling back and forth a bit as her internal gyroscope righted itself. When she felt able to stand on her own without falling over, she hopped out of bed with a clop as her hooves hit the cold floorboards. Twilight Sparkle shook her head, dark indigo and pin-streaked mane swaying with the motion. She stretched her limbs, bending low to the floor. On her left flank there was an emblem of a six-pointed pink star surrounded by 5 smaller white stars, her cutie mark. The source of the rustling, a diminutive figure covered entirely in blankets and huddled up in a small cushioned basket, continued to roll about and mumble incoherently. Twilight smiled apologetically and nudged the little bundle gently.
Come on, Spike. I know you've got to be awake. Can't stay in bed all day.
She added that last part when her assistant huffed angrily and turned around again, but otherwise did not answer her. Twilight nudged him again, a tad more forcefully, but only received the same response for her efforts.
So, you want to play hardball, eh?
The horn on Twilight's forehead began to light up with a purple glow as she worked her unicorn magic. The bundle of cloth containing her assistant slowly levitated into the air, while being enveloped in the same purple glow. She tilted it until a purple and green scaled figure began to slide out. Twilight's eyes scrunched up in concentration as her draconic assistant was lowered onto the floor feet first, and then she relaxed. The magical aura surrounding the dragon relaxed as well, and when it dissipated, Spike fell flat on his face. The light green cheek feathers splayed out, and his green back spikes ruffled.
Stepping until the very end, I see.
Twilight sighed heavily and left the dragon on the floor as she walked towards one of the many windows in her second-story bedroom. She pushed the window pane outwards, and the sound from outside hit her even harder. Twilight looked out into the streets below. She withheld a gasp. There didn't seem to be any single square inch that didn't have at least one hoof occupying it. The sky was no less cluttered, as pegasi were flying around various buildings and adorning them with green ribbons. Amidst the sounds outside, Twilight heard a band, or perhaps 50 of them, playing all manner of tunes. 2 ponies passed by, talking to each other excitedly, and the eavesdropping unicorn managed to pick up the phrase Glowmelon.
Did I hear that correctly?
Twilight idly wondered.
I hope Pinky hasn't mixed paste in her pastries again.
Twilight heard a highly exaggerated yawn from behind her, and she turned her head to see Spike finally opening his sleepy green eyes. The dragon stared at the ground before looking at Twilight with his poorly acted, quizzical expression.
Hey, how'd I end up here?
He asked, with all the innocence of a convicted criminal.
You were probably sleepwalking again. That was your excuse for why I found you rampaging through a city made of stacked books last week, right?
Twilight asked, with a slight smirk. The dragon's cheek took a reddish tinge.
Very funny. What did I tell you about using your magic on me without asking?
Twilight asked, sounding quite indignant.
Who says I did? You wouldn't know. You were asleep after all.
Twilight replied, scoring as close to a victory as she could find in such a silly argument. She poked her head back out the window.
Ponyville sure is busy today. Does every pony know something I don't?
Well, sure, lots of things. Like how to respect people's privacy, how to treat people kindly when they're asleep, and how not to upset fearsome dragons.
Spike ticked off his answers on his fingers before looking up at Twilight's unamused expression.
Well, among other things.
Fine, Mr. Unhelpful. I'm going to find out what's going on then. You should come too, unless the floor is really that comfortable for you.
Twilight began to walk towards the stairs, and Spike scoffed.
What's to stop me from going back to my bed?
The dragon asked. As soon as the words left his mouth, his bed was covered in a purple magic and levitated to the top of a nearby bookshelf.
Well, what's to stop me from using your bed?
If you get on my bed, I'm not levitating it onto a bookcase. I'm sending it to the top of the tree.
Twilight responded, voice unreadable. She descended down the stairs without a look behind her.
Jeez. She thinks I'm the grumpy one in the morning.
Spike huffed, before diligently following her down the staircase. Twilight closed the door behind her, as she and Spike prepared to brave the crowded streets of Ponyville. The young dragon took one look at this thick crowd before hopping atop Twilight's back.
Wow, you never realize just how many ponies live in Ponyville until something big starts happening.
Twilight spoke to both herself and her young charge.
I still don't even know half of these ponies by anything more than their cutie marks.
Twilight heard a whoosh and felt the effects of an air displacement above her. She tilted her head up and saw a streaking blue sky blue figure, trailed by a stream of color that matched the mane and tail of the pony who created it. On the speeding figure's flank rested a symbol of a multicolored lightning bolt shooting from underneath a cloud, but it could barely be seen at the speed its owner was traveling. The Pegasus known as Rainbow carried a roll of something green in her hooves as she approached the top of Twilight's treehouse. Then the Pegasus disappeared in another bolt of color, traveling around and around the treetop faster than Twilight's eyes could follow. When the whirling rainbow came to a stop, a long green banner gently fell atop its branches, barely visible among the green leaves. Rainbow held her chin in her hoof as she inspected the handiwork, before finally giving a shrug. Then she looked down and saw Twilight watching her from down below. The Pegasus began a slow descent towards her friend.
Oh, hey Twilight, you're finally up!
Rainbow exclaimed. Spike coughed into his hand, and the Pegasus smiled awkwardly.
Oh, and you too, Spike.
Yeah, we're up, and so is everybody else, it seems.
Twilight replied, as a pony jostled her past her in a hurry.
Seeing as how you just did something to my house, I take it you know more about what's going on than I do.
Oh yeah, it's a great day to be alive, Twilight. It's the 4th annual Glowmelon Festival.
Rainbow vaulted up into the air, taking the opportunity to do a few cartwheels before landing back down onto the ground. Twilight raised an eyebrow as Dash panted from a small bit of exertion, and she waited for her friend to continue. The Pegasus caught her breath and gave a lopsided grin.
Sorry, I've sort of been up all night helping get things ready with Pinky. Drank a huge cup of coffee. Big mistake. Or maybe it was the best idea ever. Hard to tell with all this buzzing in my head. By the way, Twilight, why are you vibrating like that?
Rainbow finally stopped talking, and Twilight saw that the mare's lavender-violet eyes were jittering back and forth in her skull.
I'm, trying out a new spell. Thanks for noticing.
Twilight smiled awkwardly.
By the way, where are Pinky and the rest of the girls?
I'm not sure about the others. I talked to them all earlier, spreading the good news and all that. But I haven't seen any pony around since then. Well, except, of course, for...
Dash's sentence was suddenly cut off.
Dashy, I didn't give you permission to take a break.
The voice was familiar, albeit at least 10 times louder than it should have been. Twilight and Rainbow watched as a bouncing pink pony made of pure energy approached them, looking very out of the ordinary. The 3 multicolored balloons marked the mare's hopping flank and looked ready to float off into the sky. That was normal. What was different was that the strange brass contraption that hung around her head and matted down her poofy mane for the purpose of holding a megaphone in front of her mouth.
Come on, Dashy, get that keister into gear. Move those hooves, flap those wings, do something with ribbons, and lots of them.
Pinkie Pie commanded, and Dash screamed and took to the sky like a thunderbolt. Pinkie Pie watched her friend fly away before looking down to see that Twilight and Spike hadn't joined Rainbowdash's stratospheric expedition.
Oh, hi, Twilight.
Pinkie Pie greeted her friend, mere inches from the unicorn's face, blue eyes shining brightly. Twilight was sent reeling backwards, and Spike jumped off her back so as not to be crushed.
Hi, Pinkie.
Twilight responded as politely as possible, cringing all the while.
Do you think you could? Oh, sure.
Pinkie Pie answered. Pinkie Pie answered the unfinished question while throwing her head back in a motion that left the megaphone positioned above her head.
I mean, oh, sure. Okay, either she said something about kosher tea or I need an ear examination.
Twilight clapped her ears repeatedly with her hooves.
Well, at least now I know the buzzing in Dash's head wasn't just from the coffee. Hey, are you two okay?
Pinkie Pie asked, sounding concerned. Spike ignored the question and turned to Twilight.
Sorry. Hey, Twilight. I don't think you'll need to worry about me sleeping again. In fact, I don't think I'll ever be able to fall asleep again.
The dragon's unfocused stare and monotonous voice gained a giggle from the pink pony.
We'll be fine in a few minutes, I'm sure.
Twilight responded to Pinkie's question, prodding Spike with a hoof and not getting a response.
Hopefully. Well, that's good. I wouldn't want you to miss out on the grandful Glowmelon Festival just because of a little thing like a blown eardrum.
Pinkie Pie hopped up and down, knocking the megaphone back over her mouth in the process. Luckily, she removed it before she spoke again.
So, how excited are you? Are you excited? Because I'm excited. I bet I'm more excited than you are. How excited are you anyways? I'm 10 times more excited. 20 times even. Excited at the atomic level. That's great. Twilight
began.
If you cut me in half, I'll explode!
Pinkie Pie pushed her face close to Twilight's own.
That's how excited I am. Oh boy, maybe Spike had the right idea about sleeping in this morning.
Twilight glanced over at their apprentice.
Too bad he still has that 1,000-yard stare thing going on. Okay, you've made your point.
The unicorn nudged the pink pony's head back a few inches with her hoof and took a deep breath.
This Glowmelon thing must be pretty special if it's got both you and Rainbow Dash so animated. Well, duh! Didn't Dashy tell you? She's been staying up every night this week waiting for the signs that the festival is going to start.
Pinkie Pie explained.
I'm making her thermoses and my special hot chocolate's coffee in exchange for her having to wake me up as soon as it was time to start preparing for the party. I see.
Twilight responded calmly. She did a double take.
Wait, hot chocolate coffee? Do you have any idea how much caffeine would be in that? How often do you drink that stuff? All the time, of course.
Pinkie Pie answered, taking out a thermos and sipping from its caffeinated contents.
Ah. Well, that certainly answers a lot of questions.
Suddenly, Twilight heard what sounded like an applause and stomping of hooves. The sound was rolling from the edges of town. Dash landed back down next to Twilight and Pinkie, and her face was positively beaming, despite the dark rings under her eyes.
They're here! It's starting!
She said, excitedly, before taking off once again.
Who's here?
Twilight asked, but Dash was already too high up to hear her question.
It must be Glowmelina's little helpers.
Pinkie Pie hopped up and down, the megaphone bobbing back and forth over her head like an upside-down pendulum and amplifying every word. Twilight watched as the crowd around the two began to split apart, moving to either side of the road, clearing a path. Twilight followed the crowd, and Pinkie Pie unquestioningly. She heard the sound of trumpet playing far away up the path that had just been made. The purple unicorn poked her head out from the crowd and stared out as far as she could see. Slowly, she watched as various shapes and figures appeared on the horizon. Moving through Ponyville was a procession of forest animals, both large and small. Tinier creatures were carrying wooden platters over their heads, while the larger ones pulled wagons. Curiously, the contents of the wagons seemed to be glowing with a green light. But Twilight's eyes were drawn in inexorably to only one creature in the parade. Heading up the pack and pulling the largest wagon into Ponyville was one of the legendary manticores. A lion-like beast, looked enormous even from a distance. His large blood-red mane stood out against its yellow coat, but not so much as its bat-like wings and pointed scorpion tail. Combined with the teeth jutting out from its lower jaw and its pointed ears, the manticore's appearance was nothing short of demonic.
Oh, Celestia, I hope that thing is only here to get a splinter taken out. I've got to get Spike out of here.
Twilight's entire body tensed up as she looked around anxiously, but she saw that no pony else was preparing to run for the hills like she was. Her body relaxed somewhat, but there was still a look of confusion on her face. The manticore strolled past her, her head held high with regal air. Most of the ponies seemed to be torn between being awestruck by the fabled creature's presence or being enraptured with the glowing contents of the cart it pulled. Once the beast had passed, the crowd Twilight had found herself in started to follow it.
Crap, sorry, forgot I was muted. Come on! Hurry up, Twilight!
Raymond suddenly shouted from up above, and Twilight saw that the Pegasus had picked up Spike at some point. Twilight followed at the will of the crowd and her friends. She eventually found herself at the town square, in the group of ponies that surrounded the animals and their payload.
Wow, I can't believe there's really a manticore here this year!
Raymond exclaimed, landing next to her two friends and jostling the other ponies in the process. Spike was knocked off the Pegasus' back by the landing and sat on the ground shuddering.
Manticore?
The tiny dragon stuttered, daring a glance at the ferocious winged beast. The manticore seemed to stare back at him, and its tail swayed playfully and sadistically. Spike screamed and jumped several feet into the air, landing on Twilight's head and taking hold of her horn.
Fire! 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 How do I work this thing?
Spike tried to aim Twilight's horn as if it were a rifle, as several confused ponies stared at the pair, and Twilight smiled back uncomfortably. Pinkie Pie just giggled.
Oh, Spiky, there's nothing to be afraid of. Probably.
Pinkie Pie tried to assuage the young dragon, punctuating her point with another giggle.
So you say, and I don't see any pony else running from the armory. For the armory,
Twilight said, trying to look up at the little soldier who was manning her turret.
But why exactly? Because no creature who's brought a load of delicious glowmelons into Ponyville could possibly be up to no good. Duh, every pony knows that.
Pinkie Pie answered, bouncing on her hooves. Then she immediately stopped, landing with her all four legs spread apart and standing stiffly with a shocked expression on her face.
Unless it's just a trap to lure us into a false sense of security so it can pounce on us.
Now was Pinkie Pie's turn to receive awkward stares from the rest of the crowd. Twilight nudged the statuesque mare with a hoof.
If you're going to run, shouldn't you get started?
She questioned.
No, first I get my Glowmelon, and then I run.
Pinkie Pie answered, following up her comment in a whisper.
It's the perfect plan.
Twilight turned her head and saw that Rainbow was no longer by her side. Instead, Dash was flying towards a wagon with the manticore that had brought it into town. She reached into the cart and pulled out a shining green orb, which she lifted into the air high above her head.
Yes! Yes! Let the Glowmelon Festival begin!
Rainbow Dash shouted out, causing the crowd to erupt into cheering. She flew back towards Twilight, Pinkie, and Spike as the other ponies began to surge towards the carts.
Sorry to steal your line, Pinky, but you seem to be a bit out of it.
Dash apologized to Pinky, who had abruptly snapped out of her stance.
Oh, don't worry about it. You were just as hard as me for all this.
Pinkie Pie said, watching as the other ponies began to grab their Glowmelons.
Oh, I almost forgot. I need to go help Mr. and Mrs. Cake hand out the plates and utensils.
Pinkie Pie rushed off towards Sugar Cube Corner, neglecting to pick up any Glowmelons in her hurry. Remadash nudged Twilight with an elbow.
What are you waiting for? Go get yourself some of this.
Rema suggested, caressing her Glowmelon lovingly as she drooled. Twilight nodded nervously and took towards the crowd. Spike immediately hopped off her head and stood next to Remadash.
No way am I getting near that thing,
the dragon exclaimed, pointing at the manticore. Twilight smiled back at him unconvincingly before joining the line of ponies that had formed near the monster. The manticore's line was the shortest of all available, and it took only a single look at the beast to know why. Twilight gulped as she watched the other ponies grab their glowing melons, and the manticore staring at them all the while. It was when it was her turn to pick one out, she nervously trotted up to the monster and attempted to smile at it.
Hi?
Twilight's shaky voice was barely audible. She pointed towards Spike, who was watching her uneasily.
My assistant over there, he'd, like one too, so is it okay if I...
The manticore stared at Twilight disinterestedly before shifting its gaze to the tiny dragon, who gasped and attempted to hide behind one of Remedash's legs. After a few tense moments, the manticore snorted, turning back to Twilight with a shrug.
Thanks?
Twilight answered nervously. She hopped onto one of the wheels of the wagon and grabbed 2 Glowmelons, and then awkwardly walked back to Remedash and Spike using her hind legs. She let out a sigh of relief.
See? No problem.
Remedash clapped Twilight on the back, causing the unicorn to almost drop the 2 melons.
Yeah, no problem.
Twilight laughed nervously, letting the Glowmelons down onto the ground. She nudged one of them towards Spike.
Here you go.
Oh,
Here you go, Mr. Commando.
I was just kidding about that killing stuff.
Spike laughed a genuine mirth as he picked up the fruit that was nearly as big as he was. He glanced at the manticore.
I'm just, gonna go back to the library now. I'll see you girls later.
With that, Spike quickly waddled off towards someplace safer for a baby dragon.
So, how do we eat these things?
Twilight asked, as she watched Spike disappear into the distance. But when she turned her head, Remedash was no longer by her side. Instead, a glowing melon came crashing down right in front of her, breaking open and splattering against the ground. Remedash landed next to the fruit and dug right in, loudly and messily tearing into the fruit. Juice and seed stained Twilight's coat, causing her to cringe and take a few steps back.
I'll just wait until Pinky brings a plate by.
Twilight decided, taking herself and her Glowmelon to a nearby unoccupied table. It only took a second before Pinkie Pie to walk by, and the pink pony handed her friend a plate and a knife with a smile.
Don't forget to state the seeds!
The pink pony cautioned, before darting back towards another pony that was lacking their silverware. Twilight's horn lit up as she grasped the knife with her magic. She cut the Glowmelon into 4 and then 8 slices. Setting the knife down, she slowly and tentatively raised a piece of the melon to her lips and took a minuscule bite. Twilight's eyes suddenly dilated, growing the size of dinner plates. Her entire body began to shiver, starting from her head and working its way down her spine. A low moan escaped her throat unwillingly, and she almost convulsed in her seat.
Surely this is the most delicious thing I've ever tasted.
It took a full 10 seconds for Twilight to recover from her euphoria, and after it passed, she levitated the chunks of the Glowmelon back into a single hole.
I can't eat this in public. It'd be almost obscene.
Twilight thought to herself as she looked around.
Maybe I'll take it someplace more private, like the library, with the lights turned off and Spike locked out.
Twilight moved to sit up from the table, but stopped when she saw one of her friends daintily strolling towards her.
Hi, Twilight. Are you having a good Glowmelon Festival?
Fluttershy asked. The yellow Pegasus' voluminous pink mane nearly enveloped her face, but Twilight could still see her smile and kind blue eyes. Her large pink tail trailed behind her like a cape as she approached.
Yeah, this thing is really delicious. Almost indecently so.
Twilight's mouth was starting to water, and she swallowed quickly.
But I'm not too hungry right now, so I'm going to save mine for later.
Yes, that's what I do as well.
Fluttershy laughed almost imperceptibly, sitting her butterfly-marked flank down on the bench and her Glowmelon down at the table.
This is your first Glowmelon Festival, isn't it?
Yeah, I've heard it mentioned a long time ago, but there were no records of it in the library. I've been trying to get an answer to what it all is, to what it is all day, but every pony has either been too busy or too excited to tell me anything, or they weren't around. Speaking of which, have you seen Rarity or Applejack yet today?
Twilight asked, tilting her head to the side.
Oh, I saw Rarity for a second out of the corner of my eye, but as soon as she picked her Glowmelon, she headed straight home in a hurry.
Fluttershy explained. Twilight nodded understandably.
You shouldn't expect Applejack to show up. Ever since she was unable to plant her own Glowmelon fields after the first festival, she swears she'd never celebrate the day again.
I see. And I can't imagine these things would be easy to grow. I've never even heard of them before, even with all the books I've read.
Twilight admitted.
Yes, they're a mysterious present. Glowmelina's gift to us all.
Fluttershy spoke the name almost reverently.
Who is Glowmelina? Pinky mentioned that name too. Is he or she assistant in Ponyville?
Twilight questioned.
Well, the rumor is that she lives in the Everfree Forest and grows Glowmelons in secret. The only time any pony hears from her is when she sends the animals of the forest to deliver her harvest to us, along with a short letter.
The yellow Pegasus explained sagely.
Really? That sounds a bit suspicious to me.
Twilight cupped her chin and hoof, but was distracted when Remedash suddenly landed on the seat next to her.
What does? Are you talking about Rarity not being here? 'Cause I know the answer to that one.
Twilight noticed the rings under Pegasus' eyes had disappeared, and, on the whole, she looked to be a whole lot healthier after having eaten that Glowmelon.
Oh man, you should have seen her during the first Glowmelon Festival. Oh, it was great. Actually, if you wait right here, I can go get the photos. That won't be necessary, Rainbow Dash.
Fluttershy quickly interjected. Twilight raised an eyebrow, but remained silent.
And no, we were discussing Glowmelina. Ooh, I know all about her.
Remedash seemed to swell in confidence.
I heard she's about 5 feet tall and has a bunch of tiny ponies do all the gardening for her. I heard she's a strong and beautiful alicorn who grows Glowmelons with her magic.
Fluttershy countered peacefully.
I heard she rides a wagon pulled by 5 cockatrices and a dog. I heard she made friends with every species of the animal world. I heard she beat up a manticore and forced it to work for her, and I totally didn't make that up just now.
I heard she made a bubblegum and puppies!
Pinkie Pie popped up, causing all her friends to jump in their seats.
So, who are we talking about? Well, those are all interesting theories. Some more interesting than others.
Twilight ignored Pinkie Pie's question for the moment.
But it sounds like no one knows anything for sure.
Actually, I think it's supposed to be that way.
Fluttershy began to explain, but Dash took the reins out of the conversation.
Yeah, right. It's like Darren Dew says, what good is a mystery if you don't bother to solve it?
Remedash quoted, drawing a smile out for Twilight.
Well, I'm sure it serves a purpose for the person trying to keep it a mystery.
Fluttershy replied considerately.
Meh.
Dash dismissed Fluttershy's case with a single syllable. She turned her attention back to Twilight.
Twilight, what do you think?
What do I think?
Twilight repeated the question.
Yeah, I'm proposing that the 4 of us...
Dash began, but Pinkie Pie suddenly gasped and held her hoofs to her cheeks.
Oh my gosh, I just remembered! I just pasted the pastries back at the Sugar Cube corner again! I gotta go!
Pinkie Pie quickly darted off in the direction of her workplace, leaving her friends behind.
Okay. I propose that the three of us follow the animals back to their source and find out the real story behind the Glowmelon Festival.
Remedies continued her speech as if it had just not been interrupted.
I'm not sure.
Twilight answered non-committedly, glancing at her Glowmelon and then at the direction of her home.
If Glowmelina really does live in the Everfree Forest, we'd be following the animals back to a very dangerous place.
Fluttershy pointed out, shrinking in her seat.
Danger Schmanger! We've been there plenty of times. Heck, even Apple Bloom's been there plenty of times.
Dash pointed dramatically towards the young filly who had just happened to be passing by, who stood in shock with the Glowmelon shining through her saddle pack.
Please don't tell my sis I got a Glowmelon. I know she hates them.
Apple Bloom practically cowered under their gazes. She was only a small pony with a pale yellow coat, red hair, and no cutie mark.
No worries, kid.
Dash giggled.
Thanks.
Apple Bloom's face lit up. She began to leave, but then paused.
Hey, can I go with you to the Everfree Forest? No.
Twilight quickly said, causing Remedies to close her mouth. Apple Bloom only looked disappointed for a second, before she continued on her way wherever she was going.
I'm still not sure if we should even go.
Fluttershy placed emphasis on the we.
Neither am I, but...
Twilight looked away from Fluttershy's silently pleading eyes, and instead turned to Remedies' mile-wide smile.
Well, it would be pretty interesting to find out what's really going on here. And if things do start to get dangerous, we could always head back home.
All right!
Remedies pumped a hoof in the air victoriously.
Yay.
Fluttershy sighed, but didn't voice any more dissent. Suddenly, the ground shook as they heard a loud explosion coming from the direction of Sugar Cube Corner. The three gathered ponies looked towards Pinkie Pie's home and place of work. They watched as what appeared to be an off-white liquid spewed from the chimney. The strange substance flew high into the air and then began to rain down upon Ponyville. A small glob landed on the table Twilight and the other girls were seated at, just barely missing her and Fluttershy's Glowmelons. Remedies blinked and dipped a hoof into the substance. She tasted it, and immediately her eyes bugged out of her head as she began to gag. It took the Pegasus several moments to regain her composure.
Well, it finally happened. Mr. and Mrs. Cake turned Pinkie Pie into Pinkie Glue.
Remedies deadpanned. The room was dark, lit by candlelight in the obtrusive sun rays that made their way through the drawn curtain. Thin smoke wafted through the air, carrying with it a pleasant burning scent. Twilight lounged on her bed, staring at a plate in front of her. It contained a slice of Glowmelon, still faintly pulsating with green light.
Oh, Glowmelon, we've been going at it for hours. Don't you think we should slow down?
Twilight's voice was low and seductive as she gazed at the fruit with ravenous eyes.
Well, I suppose you're right. One more tiny nibble couldn't hurt.
Twilight slinked across the bed towards her prize, tail twitching. She took the melon and chunk into her hooves and slowly bringing it to her lips.
Hiya, Twilight!
Pinkie Pie greeted Twilight from outside the bedside window.
Son of Celestia!
Twilight screamed, throwing the Glowmelon into the air to splat against the ground. She started to hyperventilate and looked at her friend in surprise.
What you doing?
Pinkie Pie asked curiously, tilting her head to the side.
Nothing at all.
Twilight answered quickly. She rapidly blew out all the candles surrounding the bed and snuffed the incense sticks.
Really? Because you were reminding me a lot of Rarity at the first Glowmelon Festival just now.
Pinkie brought up.
Oh, maybe I should go get the pictures and compare the two of you. That won't be necessary.
Twilight echoed through Fluttershy's earlier statement.
Why are you here? How are you here? Oh, Fluttershy asked me to come get you. Her and Remedies have been knocking on your door for the past 5 minutes, but you haven't been answering.
Pinkie Pie exclaimed.
As for how I'm here, well...
A look of confusion passed over Pinky's features as she tilted her head to the side, looking above herself and then below. She stared at Twilight for a single second before falling out of view. Twilight only heard a loud thump. The unicorn sighed while she picked up her alarm clock and checked the time. It was 1 o'clock.
Darn, that's right. I was supposed to meet those two an hour ago so we could start our investigation.
Twilight thought to herself as she set the device down, lighting up her horn. The lights in the room lit up as well, following her lead. She hopped out of bed next to the remains of her glowmelon, which she stared at with pouting lips. Then she trotted downstairs with her head hung low. She opened the front door and saw Rainbow Dash, Fluttershy, and Pinkie Pie waiting for her. Pinkie Pie was already talking a mile a minute.
And then it looked like she was going to start making out with it or something, and I said, "Hiya, Twilight," and then...
Pinkie Pie stopped talking when she saw that Twilight was looking at her with rosy red cheeks.
Oh, do you want to finish the story yourself? So, Glowmelina, we're going to find her, right?
Twilight spoke quickly, her voice wavering slightly under Rainbow Dash and Fluttershy's curious stares.
Oh, I'd love to come, Twilight, but I'm still having to clean up the mess I made around town.
Pinkie Pie giggled, pulling out a mop and wash bin.
Would you believe this is the second time I've done this?
I believe it. He was stuck to Applejack's flank for nearly a half a day last time.
Rainbow Dash replied with a laugh. Pinkie Pie giggled as well.
Oh yeah, I remember that now. Anyways, I have to go. Have fun, every pony.
Pinkie Pie waved and bounced off towards something that needed cleaning.
What about you, Spike? Do you want to come along with us?
Twilight turned to ask her assistant, who was busy adjusting the cuffs on his tuxedo.
Huh? Oh, sorry, but I'm kind of busy.
Spike answered, as he took a small bouquet of flowers out of his pocket and started to head up the stairs.
Tonight, I've got a date with a lovely glowmelon.
Not on my bed!
Twilight frantically shouted after her apprentice as the door closed behind the dragon. Her two friends again looked at her with odd expressions. Twilight smiled back awkwardly and pushed the two out of the doorway.
Come on, we have to get moving before the caravan leaves.
Twilight shut the door behind them and followed their two friends as they led the way. It didn't take them long for them to find a group of animals and their wagons. Many ponies were walking up towards the small animals and depositing their glowmelon seeds into the platters.
Did you remember to save your seats, Twilight?
Fluttershy asked.
Oh, no. Pinkie even told me to, but I forgot.
Twilight admitted, looking a bit ashamed.
Psh, what's a little thing like seeds bother him? I just swallow them.
Rainbow Dash said proudly.
Oh no, Rainbow Dash, don't you know what happens to ponies when they swallow glowmelon seeds?
Fluttershy asked, her eyes narrowing, but a small smile creeping across her face.
They start to grow a glowmelon in their stomach.
Rainbow Dash just laughed at Fluttershy's attempt to sound sinister, and Twilight chuckled as well.
Well, actually, considering that we don't know anything about the glowmelons or this Glowmelina pony, that could actually happen.
Twilight shook her head.
Just one more reason to expose the mystery behind this festival.
The manticore roared ferociously, and the ponies who had been going to deposit their seeds scattered. Other animals seemed to take this as a sign, and they began to hitch themselves back onto the wagons.
Okay, they must be getting ready to head back. All we gotta do is follow them.
Rainbow Dash explained.
Yes, but quietly.
Twilight whispered back, watching the manticore stand up and shoulder its burden.
Are you sure we should be doing this?
Fluttershy asked. She gulped as the manticore stared at her with a mild interest.
Of course. It's up to us to solve this mystery, for all of Ponyville.
Twilight's voice was resolute, and her expression was firm. The animals finished their preparations and started to walk down the path that led out of Ponyville. A few ponies were cheering and waving goodbye, so Twilight joined in.
Be seeing you again soon.
Twilight smiled craftily.
Real soon.
Okay, they're still just moving forward. Keep up the pace, every pony.
Rainbow Dash called out from from up above before landing down on the grass next to Twilight Sparkle and Fluttershy. The three friends trotted side by side.
Okay, phase 1 of 1 is going pretty well then.
Twilight responded, nodding her head.
All we have to do is keep following them at a safe distance and we shouldn't be found out.
Unless they have very sharp eyes or sharp hearing.
Fluttershy stared at the large empty meadow that surrounded them.
Or very sharp teeth.
Raminash stood up on her back legs and posed as if she were ready to attack the yellow Pegasus. Fluttershy backed up a bit, but didn't change her expression.
I don't think teeth are sensitive in the same way,
she replied coolly, before she continued to walk at her previous pace.
Rainbow Dash, keep it down. You too, Fluttershy.
Twilight spoke softly, cocking her head to the side with an odd expression.
Wow, that's something I never thought I'd say.
Sorry.
Fluttershy whispered so quietly she was almost inaudible.
This is all so weird. The squirrels that show up at night to post the announcement of the festival? Weird. The parade of animals in the Ponyville? Also weird. But a manticore? That's so beyond weird.
Raminash's voice scared away a nearby butterfly.
Thanks for the recap, but what did I just say about being quiet?
Twilight asked, eyes narrowed.
Sorry. It's just weird. I know I keep saying that, but, well, it is.
Dash retorted, her voice only slightly lowered.
This is so not natural.
Shh. And I wouldn't even be able to... And I wouldn't even be out here if I didn't think something was going on.
Twilight answered, as he turned to the quiet Pegasus.
What's your opinion on this, Fluttershy?
My opinion?
She answered Twilight's question with another question, though her friends could barely hear her.
Well, I guess it's weird, I suppose. See? Everyone agrees with me, Twilight.
Raminash loudly boasted.
I never disagreed with you.
Twilight finally lost control of herself.
Shh, Twilight, keep your voice down.
Fluttershy whispered, causing the purple unicorn to sigh in frustration. Rainbow Dash laughed into her hooves to stifle the noise.
Okay, new rule. No one is allowed to say the word weird.
Twilight agreed.
What should we say instead, then?
Fluttershy asked innocently.
I don't know, abnormal, mysterious, kooky, spooky, queer.
Twilight rattled off synonyms.
I get it. So, like, Fluttershy is pretty queer, right?
Raminash blurted out of nowhere, causing Twilight's head to jerk backwards, as if she'd been hit in the face with a bucket of water.
Excuse me.
Fluttershy asked with a small hint of indignation.
Yeah, I mean, you gotta know us animals in and around Ponyville, but they haven't told you anything about Glowmelina?
Dash asked, her tone of voice entirely serious.
Well, they aren't exactly the most conversational creatures.
Fluttershy admitted, hanging her head low.
They've never shown me anything to do with it, so I just assume that I'm not meant to find out.
That is a bit weird. I mean odd. But why is she coming with us then?
Twilight wondered to herself.
Maybe it's like that time we tried to throw a surprise party for Pinkie Pie and she got the wrong idea. Maybe Fluttershy feels left out. Don't worry, Fluttershy. After today, we'll know whether or not they've had any reason to keep it a secret from you.
Twilight smiled genuinely.
After all, what good is a mystery if you don't solve it?
Daring do! Woo woo!
Raminash cheered loudly, causing Twilight to cringe.
Yay.
Fluttershy sighed, sounding very unenthusiastic.
Well, at least I cheered one of them up.
Twilight thought with an awkward smile.
I should just kick myself just for saying that. You should probably check our heading soon, Dash.
Twilight advised her friend. Raminash gave an informal salute before taking off. She returned almost as quickly as she'd left.
We're gonna want to start leaning leftish.
Raminash motioned vaguely with her hoof.
Like about 20 degrees lefter.
That's the same report you had a few minutes ago. You don't think these animals are leading us to a wild goose chase, do you?
Twilight asked her two friends, looking around the rolling meadow apprehensively.
Psh, no way. There aren't even any geese in that pack. Trust me, I remember. Me and geese go way back.
Remedies swept her hoof out wide. Twilight and Fluttershy both shared a perplexed stare, but followed Dash's directions.
Wait, are these hoofprints?
Twilight spoke up, calling Fluttershy and Remedies to her side. Indeed, there was a distinct hoofprint in the patch of dirt. Twilight placed her hoof in the indent. It was a perfect fit.
Okay, so maybe there was a goose and I just didn't see it.
Remedies shrugged.
I don't have griffin eyes, you know. This is a very wild goose.
Fluttershy lamented, hovering over the ground and massaging her legs. Twilight sighed.
Okay, girls, we're obviously going about this the wrong way. I'm not sure how, but the animals seem to know we're following them. Maybe it's because some of us can't keep quiet for 10 seconds, or maybe it's because one of Dash's goose friends is acting as a double agent.
Twilight accused, and Remedies glared at her.
Sorry, I'm just a little tense.
Maybe we should go home?
Fluttershy asked hopefully, but Twilight shook her mane.
I'm not ready to give up yet. We've come too far to back down now. We just need to come up with a new plan.
The unicorn responded, taking a rest and sitting down. Remedies and Fluttershy followed her lead, lowering themselves onto the grass and forming a small circle. They sat in silence, intermittently staring at the ground or the sky. Remedies entertained herself by ruffling her mane and blowing it out of her face. When she grew bored of that, she started to tap the ground idly. And, as time wore on, the tapping grew louder and louder.
This is so hard!
Remedies finally exploded.
We've barely been thinking for a minute.
Twilight said.
I mean, if it was just me and Fluttershy, we could just fly up and track them from the sky, but no, you have to ruin everything by not having any wings.
Remedies accused the flightless unicorn.
Oh, Dash, I'm so sorry. If I had known you felt that way, I would have gone back in time and come out of my mother as a Pegasus.
Twilight said this with the utmost sincerity, which caused Remedies and even Fluttershy to giggle.
That's alright, Twilight.
Remedies said.
Not every pony can be as cool and feathered as me. We'll think of something that doesn't involve bending, space-time.
I'm glad to see all those books are improving your vocabulary.
Twilight chuckled for a moment and then stopped.
Wait, maybe the sky is the answer.
Twilight's two friends just stared at her, confused. The unicorn stood up excitedly.
If you two fly up and create a big enough cloud, then I could use my cloud walking spell to sit on it, and then we could all follow the animals from the air.
She explained her plan. Remedies' smile grew wider by the second.
Great idea!
Dash congratulated.
Wait right here.
The speedster took off by herself, leaving Fluttershy in the dust. She ascended high into the sky until she was able to touch the fluffy white wisps that populated it. Remedies pounded her hooves together and began to punch and kick the cloud into a pile. A particularly large cloud tried to escape the chaos, but dashed towards it and grabbed it from behind. She flipped it into the air and drove the errant cloud into the rest of the wisps she had gathered. Remedies wiped a bit of sweat from her forehead, moved behind a makeshift sky raft, and lowered it to the ground where Twilight and Fluttershy were waiting.
Alright, hop on.
Dash said excitedly.
Hold on, I need to get the spell working first.
Twilight concentrated and closed her eyes as her horn began to glow with its characteristic purple tinge. A purple aura covered her hooves and dissipated. After that, she hopped atop the cloud and, thankfully, did not fall through. Fluttershy joined Twilight wordlessly.
Alright, now we're off to find Glowmelina!
Remedies said. She proceeded to rocket the cloud back into the sky at high speed. Fluttershy screamed.
Just go into the evergreen forest already!
Remedies shouted at the animals below from her perch on the cloud.
This is getting a bit dull. They just keep going round and round in circles.
Twilight's eyes followed the herd as it continued to aimlessly wander.
The sun will be going down in another minute, or in another hour or so.
This is hardly the adventure I was looking forward to.
Dash huffed and pouted.
But it is much safer.
Fluttershy said, as she snuggled into the cloud with a faint smile. Remedash groaned pitifully and began to beat her hooves against the cloud. Twilight rolled her eyes and sighed, turning to look back at the animals. Her eyes shut open wide.
Actually, Rainbow, you just might get your wish yet.
Twilight remarked, waving her hoof and calling the blue Pegasus over to the edge.
You see that? This is the first time I see them heading in a straight line since we got up here.
Indeed, the animals were finally seeming to have a distinct heading. They were already nearing the forest.
If they continue in their current direction, they'll reach the edge of the forest in under a minute.
Twilight calculated.
Aw, yeah!
Remedash shouted. She jumped off the cloud without another word, flying behind the skyward platform and pushing it at subsonic speed straight towards the tree line. Fluttershy squealed, but her voice was devoured by the whipping wind. The cloud abruptly stopped, nearly sending Twilight and the yellow Pegasus flying into the forest.
And now we just have to wait until they enter the forest.
Remedash climbed back onto the stationary cloud and began to stomp her hooves in anticipation. She monitored the animals below anxiously, a manic smile on her face. The manticore stopped just short of walking to the woods, the rest of the animals following its lead. A stray sheep baaed in a questioning tone, and the boar replied with a haughty snort. The manticore silenced both of them with a leer and pointed two clawed fingers into the separate directions. The animals nodded in unison and started to split up. Most of the wilder creatures braved the entrance to the Everfree Forest, while the animals carrying the carts and bowls all followed the manticore's new path along the treeside.
Wow! Twilight, tell me this is not so totally clear.
Remedash asked. Twilight smacked the side of her face with a hoof.
Oh, this is just too bad. We can't follow all of them. Guess we'll just have to head home.
Fluttershy opened her wings and began to daintily flutter off to the edge of the cloud, but Remedash grabbed the poor actress by the tail before she could get away.
Oh, no you don't!
Remedash admonished her friend, reeling the pink tail in and depositing Fluttershy back onto the cloud.
This is easy. All we have to do is split up.
I'm not so sure about that.
Twilight said, her face twisting in thought.
In the past, we've always succeeded by staying together.
I agree. I agree.
Fluttershy emphatically agreed with her unicorn friend, nodding her head repeatedly.
Don't worry, Fluttershy. I'll handle the big bad forest.
Dash thumped a hoof against her own chest.
You and Twine can just follow the silly old manticore. I don't agree. I don't agree.
Fluttershy squealed and shook her head back and forth. But Dash had already flown off the cloud. The Pegasus gently pushed the cloud back into the ground.
You two can hook fit from here, right?
Dash asked her rhetorically, knocking the cloud away with a dismissive motion of her arm.
Hold on, I'm not even sure this is even necessary.
Twilight spoke up.
All the creatures carrying the wagons and bulls are heading off in one direction. If either of the two groups are heading back to Glowmelina, it would be them.
An interesting theory.
Remedash admitted, before starting down the path through the Everfree Forest.
But the rumors say Glowmelina lives in the forest. We can't leave any stone unturned, or any path unfollowed.
Rainbow Dash!
Twilight worriedly called after her friend. The Pegasus began to disappear into the shadows.
Don't worry, I'll be fine.
The Pegasus dismissed them. She heard the rustling in the bushes next to her. She stuck her head into the bush and then pulled it out.
Oh, hey, Fluttershy, I think one of your chickens got loose and get it.
There was a freakish hiss, and in an instant, Remedash was turned to stone.
Cockatrice.
Twilight sighed.
Of course.
Twilight struggled to push the stone grey Remedash up the gentle slope. Fluttershy tried to help, but could add little to the effort. The two struggled for an eternity, and finally made it to the top. Twilight looked out and saw that the entourage of animals was still out in front of them.
Good. We haven't lost them.
Twilight Sparkle said, panting heavily and leaning against the petrified Pegasus.
Shouldn't we be trying to fix Rainbow Dash right now?
Fluttershy asked concernedly.
There'll be time for that later. Besides, she did this to herself.
Twilight reasoned, hopping up and taking a seat on the statue's back.
Even if it was a reckless thing to do, Rainbow Dash got herself turned to stone trying to help us solve this mystery. She wouldn't want us to drop what we were doing just to help her.
Did you ask her that?
Fluttershy muttered under her breath.
What?
Fluttershy asked. Twilight asked. Fluttershy didn't repeat herself.
Anyway, I have the kit for petrification back at the library. As soon as we figure this out, we'll have Rainbow Dash as good as new.
If you say so.
Fluttershy sighed, looking at the confused expression on Rainbow Dash's frozen face.
Right. We won't let Rainbow Dash's sacrifice be in vain.
Twilight answered with a too cheery smile. She looked back towards the animals, and her mouth fell open. Where previously she had seen a line of animals carrying wagons and bowls, she now saw nothing at all. The tracks in the grass simply disappeared, just as if the animals had disappeared into thin air.
No!
Twilight finally shouted as the realization sunk in.
No, we came so far! We did so well, except for Rainbow, but she'll get better.
Fluttershy looked at what Twilight was seeing and sighed in relief.
There, Twilight. You did your best.
Fluttershy placed a hoof on her friend's shoulder.
Maybe it's like I said before. Maybe we aren't supposed to find out about some things.
But that's not true. All my life I've been charged with finding the answer to questions that other ponies don't even ask. Even my job right now is to find out the nature of an abstract concept, friendship.
Twilight rapidly explained.
This Glowmelon Mystery is huge, and I can't just sweep it under the rug like I did with Pinkie Pie's Pinkie Sense.
I'm sorry, Twilight.
Fluttershy backed off a bit. Twilight's shoulders slumped and she shook her head.
No, I'm the one who should apologize. It was clear you never wanted to come along with Dash and I, but I tried you wrong anyway.
Twilight's voice was heavy with sadness and disappointment.
We'll take Rainbow Dash back to my place, and I'll fix her up with the potion Zecora gave me.
Okay. Please don't beat yourself up about this.
Fluttershy responded, sounding almost as depressed as her friend. Twilight shook her head again.
Don't worry about me. I'm fine.
Twilight replied, though her voice still carried a tinge of sadness. She hopped over Rainbow Dash's back and stared back into the nothingness that the animal caravan had disappeared into.
I guess there's just one mystery that I won't be able to solve.
Twilight continued to stare into the darkness, into the distance for a while longer. But there was nothing out there, just the setting sun, the sky, the grass, and the odd green glow.
Wait. Odd green glow.
Twilight rubbed her eyes and looked again. Indeed, a small pulse of green light could just barely be made out against the duller greens of the grass.
Fluttershy, look!
Twilight grabbed Fluttershy's cheeks and pointed her face towards the glow.
I don't see anything.
The Pegasus answered, squinting in her eyes. But then the light grew much larger, and the portal began to open up. All of a sudden, the animals started to pour out of the empty space as if they just walked out from behind a curtain. They were no longer carrying carts and bowls, but they dispersed throughout the field from the point that they had originated from.
This is great! Rainbow Dash will be able to find out about Glowmelina after all.
Twilight dropped her friend's head to the ground and spoke to the statue.
She can't hear you, you know.
Fluttershy pointed out with her raised eyebrow. Twilight barely noticed, paying full attention to where the animals were coming out of. Soon, the trickle of critters slowed down and came to a complete stop. But, if the slight green glow was any indication, the door or portal they'd come through was still open.
Alright, it should be safe now. Let's go!
Twilight wiggled her rear like a cat eyeing a toy before bounding down the hill and towards the light.
But what about...
Fluttershy began to speak, but Twilight was already out of earshot. Fluttershy sighed and felt a tiny foot against her hoof. She looked down to see a small white rabbit.
Oh, hi, Angel Bunny. Would you mind helping me get my friend down the hill?
Angel stomped the ground a single time.
I thought not.
Fluttershy sighed once more, and moved behind the statue and began to push. Twilight Sparkle passed a few animals as he ran towards the entrance. None of them were dangerous, so she didn't pay them much attention. Though she did spot a lone goose, which almost made her laugh. It was only a short jog to the source of the light, and Twilight made it there at a good clip. She could see now that the glow seemed to be peering out of a crack, as if a door hadn't been fully closed. Using her intuition, she decided to see if it was actually a door. Her horn lit up, and the purple glow began to fuel around the empty space in front of her. It latched onto something round and pulled, opening the portal wide.
Wow!
Twilight couldn't help but to remark at what she saw. Behind the door was a small garden, with glowmelon still fresh on the vine, pulsating with the light that had gained her attention. Twilight took a step inside. She could see the wagons and the bowls of seeds sitting against the wall that couldn't be seen, similar to how the door had been hidden.
It's like an invisible shed, except I can still feel the wind and the sun.
Twilight thought to herself as she entered. The door closed behind her automatically, but she didn't pay it any attention.
This place is amazing!
Twilight didn't see any pony or any other creature around. A few indiscernible posters decorated the room, but otherwise it appeared fully uninhabited.
Hello? Is anybody here?
She called out, looking around eagerly. Nothing answered her, but she did hear a rustling from the far side of the shed. Twilight noticed a single glowmelon begin to slowly and dramatically rise into the air.
Glowmelina?
The glowmelon suddenly shot upwards, and underneath it, wearing the glowmelon-like hat, was the manticore. All of the color drained from Twilight's body.
Glowmelina?
Twilight asked for a second time, more hesitantly. The manticore replied with a ferocious roar, and it charged straight for her. Twilight screamed and dashed towards the exit. Unfortunately, she missed the door and crashed headfirst into an invisible wall. She pounded at the wall with her hose, but it didn't give. The manticore was getting closer.
Oh, Celestia, where's the door?
The hair on her back stood on end, and she took off to the left into the glowmelon patch. Not a second later, the creature smashed into the wall with a sickening splintering crash. The impact sent wood chips flying through the air, a few of which were now embedded in the manticore feline's face. The beast roared in pain, and Twilight spared it a single glance.
What is this shed made of?
No matter where the chips had come from, the beast was now in pain and even angrier than it had already been. It bellowed once more before charging at its quarry again.
This is bad, this is bad. Let me turn to spreads if I can't find that door.
Twilight quickly surveyed her options. There was very little room for her to run. The glowmelon vines blanketed 2/3 of the room and were heavily concentrated to the left and the right sides. The vines were covered with sharp thorns, and Twilight had already cut herself by diving out of the manticore's path straight into them. She needed a distraction. Thinking quickly, she picked up one of the few unpicked glowmelons with her magic, and with a strong telekinetic force, hurled it at the manticore in front of her. The melon exploded into green juice and fruit flesh, and didn't exactly knock the beast down, but it did momentarily stop its charge. Twilight ran to the wall opposite of where she'd entered, and knocked frantically with both her hose and the spell.
Please have a rear exit.
She pleaded out loud, but no matter how much she pounded and propped, the wall stood firm. That meant that the only way out was where she'd come in, and that direction was blocked by a savage monster that was slowly approaching its cornered prey. Twilight's horn shone bright as another glowmelon flew through the air towards the manticore, and then another. The first hit the beast square in the side of the head, but the second one swatted out of the air by the enormous clawed paw. Body trembling from overexertion, Twilight levitated another melon to her side, but didn't throw this one so quickly. She magically swung the fruit, as if it was to strike at the manticore again, but pulled back at the last second, causing the beast to dodge in vain. She then brought the melon towards herself, and grabbed onto it for dear life before flinging it, both herself and it, over the manticore and towards the other side of the room. Twilight felt the swish of the claws through her tail as she passed over her assailant.
I'm dead. I couldn't hit the wall and fall apart into 2 pieces and...
She released the glowmelon before it collided with the wall and fell to the ground. Without even taking a moment to make sure she was intact, She turned her head to the invisible barrier and began to buck at it with both hind legs, moving a bit more to the left every time she was met with a firm resistance. She kept her eyes on the approaching predator and threw more projectiles at the beast to keep it at bay. Before long, the vines were looking much barer than before, and the manticore was looming even closer. She couldn't bear to look at its hungry eyes anymore, and turned around. Twilight's eyes shut tightly as tears began to fall down her face. She knocked on the wall, moved a bit, knocked again, moved a bit, knocked again, blindly threw a glowmelon, moved a bit more, and then repeated the desperate cycle.
I can't find the door. I can't remember where it is. I'm going to die here unless...
Suddenly, she felt the wall give under her hoof, just a bit. She quickly tossed the last glowmelon in the room at the manticore, not daring to open her eyes and see if it had hit its mark or not. Her horn lit up as a purple light scanned the flat surface and found the doorknob. Grasping it with her mind, she pulled and then pushed, and then the door opened, and so did her eyes. Fluttershy was on the other side, with a statue of Rainbow by her side. Twilight opened her mouth, but before she could utter a single word, the Pegasus pushed past her and into the cabin. There was a loud roar, but the sound hadn't come from the manticore. Twilight shakily turned her head around, and Fluttershy was standing up to the manticore. In fact, the ferocious killer was cowering before the tiny yellow Pegasus.
How?
Twilight stuttered.
I'm so sorry, Twilight.
Fluttershy turned her head to apologize before refocusing her stare at the manticore.
Bad! That's a bad kitty, Hal.
How?
Twilight asked confusedly, still shaking with adrenaline.
You know this monster? You're on a first-name basis with this monster?
Oh, please don't think too badly of him, Twilight. He's really quite nice.
Fluttershy said meekly.
Fluttershy is apologizing for the manticore. Clearly up's down, left is right, and I am a sea pony named Steve.
He must have gotten too greedy with the glowmelons and then tried to run you out when you caught him.
Fluttershy continued, failing to notice Twilight's eye twitching.
I don't think he was trying to run me out. I don't think he was trying to run me out as much as he was trying to run me through with this claws.
Twilight argued, but Fluttershy didn't pay any mind. The Pegasus flitted up to the manticore's head, taking off the glowmelon that still crowned it.
Now say you're sorry,
The beast's master demanded. The manticore looked at the ground sheepishly before issuing an apologetic lick to the tamer's face. Fluttershy giggled, but quickly regained her stern facade.
To Twilight as well.
The manticore approached Twilight morosely, tongue lolling out of its mouth.
It's okay, really.
Twilight said, with an extremely strained smile. The manticore appeared to shrug, and walked past her, towards the Everfree.
See you next year, Hal. Oh, and try not to get lost on the way back to the shed this time.
Fluttershy waved goodbye to the retreating hybrid, and it actually waved back as it entered into the woods. Twilight's ears pricked up.
Wait, do you mean that the... Wait, do you mean that the animals hadn't been on to us and they'd just been going in circles because the manticore lost its way?
Twilight asked. Fluttershy turned to Twilight, finally able to give her friend full attention.
It seems that way.
Fluttershy answered, eyes looking back and forth nervously.
I'm, guessing you have a few questions for me?
Understatement of the year.
Twilight deadpanned. Twilight Sparkle was seated near Fluttershy in the invisible shed. Ramdash's immobile form stood next to them. Angel was there too, using the statue as a sofa. Twilight was rubbing her temples with both hooves.
So let me get this straight. You're Glowmelina?
Twilight asked, voice strained with incredulity.
No, well, sort of. I mean...
Fluttershy stumbled on her words.
You see, Glowmelina doesn't really exist. She's imaginary and I created her using my imagination.
Okay, but why?
Twilight questioned her friend. Fluttershy didn't answer immediately, and made a variety of soft, uncomfortable sounding noises.
Maybe it'll be easier if I start from the beginning.
Fluttershy sighed.
Go ahead. It's not like Rainbow Dash is going to start eroding.
Twilight replied with a slight smirk, tapping her frozen friend's leg for emphasis.
Okay.
Fluttershy began her tale.
I might have told you this before, but when I was just a filly, I got my cutie mark when I landed in a field near Ponyville and made friends with all the wonderful creatures I met.
A very young Fluttershy pranced through the fields. Small critters followed her, as if on parade. A butterfly landed on the little filly's nose and was reflected in her bright blue eyes.
From then on, I took regular trips from Cloudsdale to the surface to play with all my new friends. I promise to come back soon.
Fluttershy waved to the sad little animals as she ascended back into the sky, the symbol of butterflies forever etched onto her flank.
One day, years later, I was being picked on by a couple of boys in school. Rainbow Dash used to be there to protect me, but she had dropped out of the school the year prior, saying that the system had been holding her back.
The blow rocked Fluttershy onto her side, the soft cloud floor of Cloudsdale breaking her fall somewhat. She flipped over and started to dig into the fluff, like a gopher might dig a hole. Two masculine shadows appeared from behind her. "Oh, you didn't catch them that time either," one of the two calls remarked, pointing at Fluttershy's cutie mark and the numerous red rings around it.
Don't worry, I'll get those nasty bugs off you, Fluttercry.
The other pony chuckled, brandishing his bug net.
The only way I could think to get away from the ponies who were bothering me was to head down to the ground, and so I did.
Right as the bully swung again, his target fell through the floor and into the blue sky below. Fluttershy began to scream as she tumbled out of the city. The wind smashed into her face, stinging her eyes and collapsing her wings to her side. She free fell for minutes on end, until a hawk appeared by her side, matching her falling speed.
Air Razor?
Fluttershy called out to the bird, whose only response was to flap its wings. It did so repeatedly, until the Pegasus' eyes went wide.
Right!
Fluttershy's wings slowly peeled off her side, and her feathers caught in the wind. Following the hawk's lead, she pulled out of the dive bomb and went soaring through the sky. Fluttershy sighed in relief and began to slowly descend in concentric circles. By the time she reached the ground, the hawk had left. She felt her hooves graze the ground and let herself collapse. Her heart stammered away in her chest as her eyes fluttered shut.
I kinda passed out when I got there. When I woke up, I found that I wasn't alone.
When Fluttershy opened her eyes, all she saw was a pitch-white expanse, only interrupted by two black dots. The two black dots blinked. Fluttershy gasped and backed up, spooking the tiny rabbit in front of her. The bunny quickly bounced off.
No! Wait! I'm sorry!
Fluttershy called after the rabbit before giving chase.
My name's Fluttershy. I'm not gonna hurt you. But when I tried to say hi to him, he ran away. I didn't know if he was alone or not, so I followed him for a bit. No! Don't go in there, little bunny!
Fluttershy shouted, as she was led towards a dark and foreboding forest. The rabbit approached the entrance to the shadowy place, but then turned away at the last moment. Sighing in relief, the yellow Pegasus continued to follow her quarry.
I don't know how long I was following him, but it must have been quite a while. He finally started to get tired, and I thought I had him for sure. But then he just disappeared.
Fluttershy stared at the blank space in front of her, where the tracks just disappeared into nothingness. She looked up at the spot from every angle, until she noticed a sliver of green light. She pushed her nose through the crack and nudged the door open.
That's when we both discovered the Glowmelon patch.
Fluttershy stepped into the room, awestruck. Though many Glowmelons were dark, faded, and rotten-looking, some plump green fruits littered the invisible cabin. Hiding behind one of the fresher melons was the White Rabbit, peeking out at Fluttershy, and ducking down as soon as their eyes met.
Neither of us had ever seen any fruit like the Glowmelons before, and we didn't know what to think of it. But the bunny sure seemed eager to try one, so I broke one open for us to taste.
Fluttershy gnawed at the hard exterior of the fruit, and, when that didn't work, tried to bounce it against against the ground like a basketball. The rabbit shot Pegasus an annoyed look, to which Fluttershy smiled apologetically. Finally, she tied a white cloth over her eyes and poised a hoof over the melon. With a hi-ya, she cleaved the melon in two. The rabbit hopped up and down excitedly before setting to work on nibbling on a new treat. More hesitantly, Fluttershy gave the glowing green interior a lick. Her wings extended outwards, and she couldn't help to start but flutter into the air in delight.
It was the most delicious fruit we'd ever eaten, and rabbits don't usually care that much for fruit. The bunny and I spent the day in the garden, eating and playing until nightfall.
The rain poured down above their heads, but not onto them. The raindrops plunked against the roof that wasn't there before sliding down the walls that couldn't be seen. And throughout it all, Fluttershy held the white rabbit close to her. The two looked out into the darkness peacefully, safe in their little hideaway from the elements.
His parents never came looking for him.
Fluttershy woke up to the sight of the white haze once again, but this time she wasn't so quick to react. She nuzzled a ball of fuzz, eliciting a yawn from her tiny companion.
Time to wake up, little angel.
Fluttershy cooed. The rabbit's eyes fluttered open, and his back legs started to jitter. The Pegasus received 5 small knocks on her nose, but she took them in stride. She smiled as the bunny hopped upright and stared at her.
Wait, does that mean the rabbit in this story is...
Twilight began to ask. Fluttershy nodded.
Yes, my little angel.
Fluttershy closed her eyes happily. Nearby, Angel rolled his own eyes and then covered his ears with his paws as he lay across Remedash's backside.
Uh-huh, that's so sweet,
Twilight remarked, ignoring the rabbit's poor attitude.
I decided to turn the shed into a clubhouse just for the two of us. Angel Bunny would live there, and I would visit at least once a day. By the time I was out of school, I had moved in as well.
Fluttershy dusted the walls with a feather duster, causing clouds of grey to puff out of the ether. Drawings and posters covered the walls, and near the back of the room sat a modest mattress with a basket next to it. Setting the duster aside, Fluttershy looked at her current residence with pride.
I always wondered who had built the cabin and who had grown the glowmelons, which is what I started to call them. It must have taken an awful lot of magic because glowmelons grew without needing my help at all. It was a good thing, too, because I'm no good at farm work.
Fluttershy turned to look at one of the pictures on the wall. It had been drawn with crayons and appeared to float in midair. The pony in the drawing wore a magician's hat and held a hoe in its teeth. The name Glowmelina was scrawled underneath it, next to this name Fluttershy.
When I was younger, I'd draw pictures of what I thought the pony who created all this might look like. Eventually, I named her Glowmelina. And then I started adding on to the character until she resembled the stories you hear today. She must have been imaginary, but she was based on some pony, or some ponies, that had once lived here. When Angel and I decided to move to Ponyville, we didn't tell anybody about our secret getaway, but we still wanted to keep it a secret, just between us. But when I started to meet more and more friends, I decided that I wanted to share Glowmelina's gift with everyone.
Fluttershy explained.
So you decided to create the Glowmelon Festival?
Twilight guessed. Again, Fluttershy nodded.
4 years ago to the day, with the help of all my owl friends, I spread the rumors of Glowmelina and brought as many glowmelons as I could into town, right when they were at their ripest. Each year's festival was more impressive than the last, and the myths about Glowmelina grew into something I couldn't control anymore. It was wonderful.
Fluttershy concluded, eyes closed.
Wow,
Twilight managed to utter at the end of the story.
that's quite a story. I can honestly say I hadn't been expecting to find out one of my best friends was behind all this.
You wouldn't have if there was anything I could have done about it.
Fluttershy stated simply.
But I know how you get when you think something needs to be explained. There's no stopping you.
Maybe someone should stop me sometimes. I always seem to get attacked by some violent creature every time I try to try.
Twilight smiled lightly.
Hydras, tartars, hounds, manticores. You'd think I'd have gotten to him by now.
It's in your nature to be curious.
Fluttershy tried to mirror the unicorn's expression, but her smile wavered.
I suppose you'll keep searching for the real Glowmelina now, after you've told everyone at Ponyville the truth.
Twilight didn't immediately answer, instead taking note of Fluttershy's morose body language. She glanced at Remedash's immobile form and the wondrous garden in which they all sat. She cupped her chin with a hoof, the vaguest hint of a smirk playing across her lips.
Well, I can't exactly turn back now. An invisible shed in the middle of nowhere, glowing fruit that doesn't grow anywhere else. It doesn't make any sense, and I had to know how this all came about. So yes, I plan to continue to search for Glowmelina and whoever is behind all this.
Twilight finally answered, in the most academic of tones.
But just because I'll be searching for the truth doesn't mean that everybody else is.
What do you mean?
Fluttershy asked, cocking her head to the side.
You don't have anything to worry about, Fluttershy.
Twilight smiled, putting a hoof on her good friend's shoulder.
I'm not going to tell anybody about this.
Really?
Fluttershy asked hopefully, and Twilight nodded in response.
My lips are sealed.
She went through the motion as well, pretending to zip up her mouth with her hoofs.
Oh, thank you, Twilight!
Fluttershy hugged the unicorn, a lone tear falling down her cheek.
Don't mention it.
Twilight giggled and unwrapped herself from the hug.
This festival is your gift to all of Ponyville. I don't want to take that away from you. Someday you might have to let that secret go, but that day doesn't have to be today, or any day soon.
Oh, thank you.
Fluttershy said with a smile.
What did I just say about not mentioning it?
Twilight laughed, causing Fluttershy to laugh as well. Twilight's laughter dissolved into a yawn, and then she looked through the transparent ceiling at the darkened sky.
We should probably head back to Ponyville now, before any pony gets suspicious.
Right.
The Pegasus nodded, and then got behind Remedash. Angel Bunny hopped down as Fluttershy raised her hooves up towards the Pegasus' rear, and then stopped. She repositioned her hooves slightly, but still didn't place them on the stony flank. She pawed at the ground uncomfortably, slightly blushing. Twilight rolled her eyes and giggled lightly.
I'll take that,
Twilight said with a smile, replacing Fluttershy behind the statue.
Oh, my head.
Remedash moaned, laying on Twilight's bed with an ice pack held to her head. She was back to her old, prismatic self again.
Sorry, the effects of a cockatrice stare can linger for quite a while depending on how long you take to unfreeze the victim.
Twilight responded, standing at her desk just a ways away from her friend.
Well, it feels like there's salamanders crawling through my veins, setting everything on fire.
Dash howled.
What were you and Fluttershy doing when I was frozen? Sitting on your plots?
No, but Angel was sitting on yours. We followed the animals as long as we could, but we never found Glowmelina, so we brought you back.
Twilight answered truthfully, and then turned her head towards the stairs.
Spike, can you bring me a scroll, please?
Oh, Pony Feathers, you expect me to believe that you two didn't find anything at all? Fluttershy was sure in a hurry to leave when I asked her about it.
Remedash replied accusingly, sitting up.
It's been a long day, and we're all tired. She just wanted to go back home.
Twilight explained, as Spike waddled into the room, yawning, a blank scroll in his hand. Twilight nodded as she took it from him.
You're welcome to stay here tonight if you don't feel good enough to fly home, Rainbow.
Maybe.
Remo answered non-committedly, rubbing the ice pack over the rest of her body like a sponge.
That Glowmelina's a slippery one. You aren't gonna give up now, are you?
Of course not. Though it may take us a while to find a new lead, you can be sure I'll follow this mystery to its end.
Twilight reassured Pegasus.
For now, let's all just relax.
Dash sighed, flopping exaggeratedly onto the bed. Twilight smiled as her quill levitated into an ink jar and then met the parchment face.
Dear Princess Celestia, I've always believed that ponies should question what they know and seek out the answers. And I still believe that. However, sometimes in our search for the truth, we can end up stepping on the hooves of others. Such a situation must be treated carefully. The truth is valuable, but sometimes a pony's secret could be worth just as much. Your faithful student, Twilight Sparkle.
Twilight nodded her head and rolled up the paper. Spike hopped onto the desk, took the scroll into his hand, and took a deep breath before blowing green fire over it. The flames consumed the parchment, and the two watched as the embers disappeared into the night sky. Celestia sat on her throne in Canterlot Castle. Her left hoof tapped at the ground impatiently, her eyes continually wandering towards the clock. Suddenly, Twilight's letter materialized before her, startling her. The princess unraveled the scroll and read through it carefully, smiling all the while.
What an interesting letter. More cryptic than usual.
The princess remarked to herself.
Though I suppose, considering the subject matter, I can't fault my student for being vague.
A royal guard entered, startling the princess a second time. Excuse me, Princess Celestia, but there's a strange package for you from Ponyville. There's no return address and it's, glowing. The guard pony said. Should we have the bomb squad look into it? Celestia's eyes light up in delight.
Oh, that won't be necessary. Have it brought in.
The princess requested eagerly. The guard obliged and returned in less than a minute with a glowing square package. He carefully placed it on the ground in front of her, and Celestia nodded repeatedly.
Thank you. You may be dismissed.
The guard bowed once, and then left the room. As soon as he left the room, Celestia tossed the scroll away and quickly levitated a plate and knife out from behind her throne. She tore into the box with her hoofs like a filly on heartwarming eve, and pulled out a large, shapely glowmelon. Brandishing the knife with a speed and expertise, she cut it into a number of pieces, and then took a bite, almost immediately.
Delicious.
Celestia shivered with delight. She eyed the only words on the box of her gift.
I wonder if I'll ever find out who this Glowmelina pony is.
The end.